All right, awesome. Hit share on this. So I want to welcome everybody. The purpose of this meeting tonight, we're going to go through a little bit of what we're doing at school as far as what our next steps are for SBL, where we're at, where we're headed. And then we're going to also take a look at a grade book, and I'm going to go through how to calculate final grades in that grade book because I know that's been a question. I'll go through some tips and tricks in there, and I'll actually go through my own child's grade book and show you some of those different ways to calculate the grades, but also how you can, all of the different data that's inside there. So we're going to start first with some of the information, and I know I've shared this in the past, but standards-based learning, it's really a way for teachers to give students feedback about their proficiency on a set of defined standards. So these standards are not standards that we've created. There are standards that are created by the state, and they're what the state has determined that all students must know in that course or in that grade level. And it's a way for us to assess and report on a student's progress in relation to those standards. So things that it keeps out of that are the class participation, homework completion. It takes out the behavior pieces, things like, did you get your syllabus signed? Those things it does not take into account because it says those are not necessarily things that you need to show proficiency in as far as a standard to be proficient in that class. So as we continue through some of this, why are we doing standards-based learning? Well, it provides targeted feedback. It helps us to align our classes, provides greater accuracy in reporting how our students are progressing on those standards because we go directly with those standards. The grades are not dependent on high stakes assessments, but rather on that body of evidence. And then there's those multiple opportunities to show mastery. So it allows our students to have those attempts to practice at those standards. And it really emphasizes that growth over achievement versus, and so we're trying to stress that it's not necessarily just about the grade, but it's also about the process of learning. And then actually, I'm going to save this conversion chart until we go through grades. So I'm going to actually switch real quick, and I'm going to go into my own child's grades because I know there's some questions about grade books and about that final grade piece. So my window disappeared. Uh-oh, hang on. That's not good. Oh, there we go. Because I was still in sharing. Okay, so we're in my student's grade book. And I have taken an example here of his social studies course. So when I go into his social studies course, I should start by saying he is an 8th grader. So his grades will be reported out in categories. So on his report card, he will receive a grade for civics and he will receive a grade for history. When he receives that grade for civics and history as a middle schooler, he'll be receiving either a 4, a 3, a 2, or a 1 in each one of those areas. Now, before I go further into the Learning Mastery Gradebook, I do want to go back to this assignment gradebook. I also want to say that viewing grades as your student is going to give you significantly more data than if you are viewing it as a parent. There are a lot of restrictions as a parent in Canvas. So I recommend going in. I typically have my student just sign in and hand me their computer, and then I look at that piece. So if I look at the overall assignment gradebook, so this is what you're typically used to seeing. There's a couple things that I can do here. Typically this up here is already arranged by due date. I've decided to change it to arrange it by assignment group. And the reason for that is because my assignment groups are learning opportunities, and then my assignment groups are demonstration of knowledge, which are these down here. The learning opportunities are those practice assignments that students do throughout the unit. They're opportunities for the teacher to give feedback, and so the student can then make corrections on those. It's also a great way for students to look and see how they would have scored had this been a demonstration of knowledge. The reason I sorted these is because then I can look and I can say on these demonstration of knowledge assignments, I want my student to have a 2. I'm sorry, I want my student to have a 3 or a 4 on those assignments, because a 4 means that my student is proficient. Anytime that I see a 2, that's a flag to me to say, uh-oh, we might need to look at these and say, what did we do here? I can look at the feedback that the teacher gave. So this little bubble here is feedback that the teacher gave. So I can view that. I can have that conversation with my student, my child, about what they need to do. And it also tells me maybe they need to go see their teacher in office hours to then maybe resubmit that piece. So I like to sort them by demonstration of knowledge and then learning opportunity, so that those are then grouped together for me. Additionally, I can click on the assignment. When I click on the assignment, I can see, and mine runs very slow whenever I'm on a Zoom, but I can see when it was submitted, if it was submitted on time or late, what the scores were or those comments were that the teacher then gave. I can see what the rubric is here, what they were graded upon. So if I click on that, it'll show me the rubric and it'll show me that longer description. So those are some pieces that I can then look at to say, what is it that my student maybe didn't do? Why did they score a 2? What is the criteria for a 3? That's all right within this section here. I can also click then on the assignment and read what the assignment document, what the assignment is asking the student to do. So those are some little tips and tricks as a parent. I'm going to go back to his grades. I'm going to want to go to his Learning Mastery Gradebook. So the Learning Mastery Gradebook is where all of the demonstration of knowledge assignments are, and this is how the final grades will be calculated. And I apologize, it takes a moment. Whenever I'm in a Zoom, it loads very slowly. As we saw earlier, we had the 2 different categories. We had civics and we had history. Within those sections, I have the different standards here. So there are 7 standards that this teacher has under civics. There's also other information here as far as alignments. In this one, there are 3 alignments. It does say not mastered. When I click on them, it shows that these 3 pieces have not yet been assessed. So they could be things that the students are working on right now, and that's why there's that rubric attached. They could be items that are coming up over the next couple of weeks, and so the teacher has put them in already. Students their final grade will not include anything that has not been assessed. They will only be graded on things that they have been assessed on. So if I click on to the next one, here I can see under civics, he scored a 2 on this assignment and a 4 on this assignment. So right now he has a 2 and a 4 in civics. He has another one here that's not been assessed just yet. Here he scored a 2 and a 3 on this standard of normative argument. This one also has 3 alignments. They've not yet been assessed. And so it looks like overall for his grades for civics, he will have a 2 and a 4, and he has a 2 and a 3. So looking at those for civics on his report card, the mode for this would be a 2. He would have a 2 on his report card. If this were a high school course and a high school course only, that is in civics, those 4 scores would be taken together for that civics piece. So that 2 plus the 4 plus the 2 plus the 3 would be added together to give 11. I divide that by 4, and this student would have a 2.75, which is a B if this were a high school course. But I do want to be very clear that this is a middle school course. So on his report card for civics, he would have a 2 for civics. As a parent, what I would want to do is look at these 2s and say, these are things that I need him to go to office hours for. I probably saw that on the assignment tab as well, the assignment gradebook. But in this piece here, this is where you can see on that rubric as well what that score would be. I want to take a moment and I want to pause and see Mr. Jennings and Ms. Elliott. Is there anything in the chat about what we've gone over? I don't.
No, there's just questions about final grade reporting and weighting in Infinite Campus.
Okay. So in Infinite Campus for civics, so in Infinite Campus, the report card will have social studies, it will say civics, it'll say history, it'll say geography and economics. Geography and economics in this instance would be an NA, meaning that it will be assessed the second semester. Because there are so many of those standards, there's no way that in one semester we would be able to assess all of them. So in social studies, those are broken apart over the course of the 4 quarters. So right now we have civics and history. So for civics, in the case of my child, if he were to get a report card today on Infinite Campus, it would say social studies, it would say civics, and he would have a 2. If this were a high school course and there was not the history piece in here and it was only a civics course, my student would have a B in their Infinite Campus for their course. I don't have a high school example to show you because I don't have a high school student, and for FERPA reasons I can't share other students' grades, but I can share mine. So we'll just have to imagine that it's a high school course. Was there any other questions about this part?
Yeah, there's one question in here that says, in this example, the answers were all worth something. In other words, blank out of 4. What about assignments that are a 0 out of 4? So a learning opportunity. If this assignment is worth 0, how does it reflect a child's grade? And I'm assuming learning as a result of that.
So learning opportunities are opportunities for the teacher to be able to give the student feedback so that they're ready to do those demonstration of knowledge assignments. So yes, they are out of 0 points because this is the opportunity for the student to see it the first time. So if I go back to his assignment gradebook, in this case, these learning opportunities came before the demonstration of knowledge opportunities. So I'm going to do my best here to see, but here's one on slavery in colonial America. So if I go up, there's parts here that have to do with modern slavery, parts of these PBL pieces. So these were opportunities for the teacher to provide my student feedback so that when they then have to submit whatever it is that they're submitting for a demonstration of knowledge, they've received that feedback along the way. They've had the opportunity to attempt it. They've had the opportunity to possibly fail at it. And after receiving that feedback, they've been able to make those corrections so that their final product is a true demonstration of what they know.
We also had some questions about mode versus mean and specifically how that relates to the example that you provided.
Okay, so the mode would be of each of these categories. So in high school, other than language arts, there are, because the courses are specialized, for example, you have world history, which teaches history standards. You have US government, which teaches the civic standards. Because those are broken apart into specific courses, and they only cover those standards. In high school, they won't have those categories. In middle school, because you have middle school social studies, for example, you do cover all of the different categories. So you cover civics, you cover history, you cover geography, and you cover economics in social studies in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, those are reported out individually as those categories. And then in high school, so we take the mode, let me go back to that, sorry. So we take the mode of each of those categories. So like I showed in the civics one, I took the mode of those assignments. So I believe it was these two standards, sorry, not assignments, the standards. I believe it was this one here. So it was standard 8C1, which was counter arguments. And it was standard 8C1, which was normative argument. So the standard requires them to create a normative argument and a counter argument for a specific topic in history. So the students then went through, this was his grades on it. The teacher would go through and say he had a 2, a 4, a 2, and a 3. His mode is then a 2. So for civics, his grade in Infinite Campus on his report card would be a 2. He does have multiple opportunities to try to get a 3 in these standards. He can go to office hours, he can reattempt or resubmit. He can work with the teacher to try and demonstrate this in another way. But what that's saying is that he is not completely proficient in that standard. Or in civics, sorry, in the category of civics.
Connected to the same question, Michelle, someone is asking what it means when they see a check in the gradebook instead of a number.
Okay, so a lot of times in the assignment gradebook, some teachers have decided to use numbers, meaning that those numbers would tell you that if this learning opportunity were graded for a demonstration of knowledge, meaning this is the first or second time that a student has maybe attempted using primary and secondary sources, right? They're not really that great at it, but they're attempting it, and I'm going to provide them some feedback on it. So it's a learning opportunity. Some teachers are putting it in as a 2 to let, or a 3 or a 4 to let the students know that if this had been a graded assignment, this is what your grade would have been. These are the corrections that you need to make in order for you to get a higher grade. When there's a check mark or an X, that means that that has been submitted. So some teachers are using it as a yes, you've completed it, here's your feedback on it, or no, you have not completed it, and here's your feedback. Some of the reasons why they're using those check marks and those pluses are that in order to resubmit, for example, especially in some of our high school courses, the teachers have put it into their announcements or into their syllabus saying that in order to resubmit assignment or to have an additional attempt at a demonstration of knowledge, that the student must first complete the learning opportunities that led up to that. And the reason for that is because we want to be able to provide a student with feedback before they attempt a demonstration of knowledge, or they're just going to be reattempting that demonstration of knowledge without having any growth. So the purpose for them going back and turning in anything that has that X in a grade book would be for the teacher to be able to provide that feedback and to know that when that student takes that additional second attempt at a demonstration of knowledge, that they're ready for it, that they've gotten to that point and they're ready for it. Just want to make sure that we have that time to ask her any questions. Okay, so I want to see, are there any final questions about final grades before we move into kind of where we're at with our staff and what we're doing next with standards-based learning? What our next steps forward are?
So before we jump into that, which actually some of the questions relate to a little bit, there is a specific question about when you're on the Learning Mastery tab, knowing which line is the standard itself. So for example, is it where it says civics, or is it each of the sublines underneath civics?
Yeah, so civics is the category. So this ones underneath that are the actual standards itself. And so those get put together for one overall civics grade. So this is what the state has said. All of these things are what students need to demonstrate in order to be proficient in civics. All of these things under history are the things that students need to be able to be proficient in order to, or to show, sorry, or need to be able to do in order to be proficient in history under that. And those categories come straight from the Colorado Department of Education. They're broken up into these categories. Okay, so if there are questions, we can always come back. I do want to go back into where we were with our presentation. So we were talking a little bit about grades. So for high school only, and I gave the example of my student's grade that he had a 2, a 4, a 2, and a 3. And that when I added those together, if he was getting a civics grade, that would be 11 divided by the 4, which would give us that average, because remember we said we were averaging each of those standards. The teachers would then average that to give him his civics grade. He would have a 2.75 or a B, because that falls within this range. Now, that is not the case for middle school. Middle school will be getting 4, 3, 2, and 1 for each of those category pieces. High school will be getting a letter grade in their report card under just what their course is. So they have one final grade, and that final grade comes from those individual standards. I'm going to just move on, and we can come back for questions if there's questions after that. So some of the things I wanted to share a little bit of data. We surveyed our staff. We know that there's issues with Canvas. A little bit of history with Canvas last year. We did look into adding Mastery Connect to our Canvas. Our elementary school did choose to move forward with Mastery Connect, and they piloted it last year and loved it. Our middle school and high school also piloted it last year slightly. They chose kind of at the beginning of the pilot that they wanted to focus more on aligning their units and wanted to use Canvas the way that it was. After we surveyed our staff, we asked, knowing that the system is not working very well, it's causing some stress and anxiety in the sense of calculating those final grades. It's a lot more work for parents. We know that it is, and no matter what I ask Canvas to do, there is no workaround for it for Canvas right now. So the question that we asked the students, or I'm sorry, the staff was, do we keep it or do we look at other options? And it looks like a majority of our staff said no, or that they're open to other options. From that, we then asked the staff if they would like to learn more about Mastery Connect, which is what elementary school is currently using and is liking. And so a majority of our staff did say they wanted to look at Mastery Connect pieces. That does not mean that we are switching to Mastery Connect, and that also does not mean that we aren't looking at other LMS systems for next year. but we are making sure that our teachers are the ones who are using this day in and day out. So we want to make sure that they have a say in where we're moving and where we're headed. We also asked them what they felt like was going well with standards-based learning. In high school, they felt like they were having more meaningful conversations and providing more meaningful feedback with their students. They felt like they are really teaching the standards this year and realizing that a lot of the pacing of their standards, and that maybe sometimes they were spending maybe too much time on one standard and not enough time on another. They're liking the fact that we're having this alignment, and they're liking the fact that there's a focus on mastery versus just doing something. It was similar in middle school with that mastery and the do piece. Some of them said that the grading was easier for them because they had a proficiency scale and they had a standard to pinpoint. They felt that there was more rigor because they were holding students to those standards. And then they felt that the students knew what they were being graded or how they were being graded because they had those proficiency scales. Things that we still need to work on. We know the grading system and we are working on that. Communication with parents and students. We've tried multiple ways of communication and it seems to reach some in some ways and some in other ways. So we're going to continue to try different ways to get information out to our different stakeholders. We noticed that students are stressed about their final grade, especially in high school, and that we need to work on some of that consistency between classrooms with some of the ways that they're implementing SBL. Same thing in middle school. And some said that it was difficult to write those assessments. So that will lead then on to some of our different professional development for the remainder of the year. So some next steps that we are working on, we have formed committees. They met today for the first time. We're working on a communications committee. How can we better communicate with our parents and our students so that you're more informed, so that you can help your student better? We do have a group who is piloting Mastery Connect. They met today. They logged into Mastery Connect. They are working with some of our elementary school teachers on learning the basic foundations. And then over the next couple of weeks, they will be basically practicing those courses that are implementing Mastery Connect. We will be reaching out to the parents and the students come January to let you know that that course is piloting Mastery Connect. So you will have your gradebook and the Mastery Tracker gradebook. I will hold a separate parent forum for that to kind of go through what does this data show you. And then we will be asking for parent and student feedback on the Canvas gradebook and the Learning Mastery gradebook versus the Mastery Connect gradebook to see, is this giving us the information that we need? Is it easy to read? And so on. We'll also be getting student feedback as well to determine if this is the direction that we want to go. Again, this was something that we did last year as well. And our secondary staff chose that it was not the right time for them, but they've chosen that this is now something that they want to definitely pursue. We also have a grading committee, and they are looking at final grades. They're looking at how do we motivate students to achieve those 3s and those 4s. And then looking at GPA, what are the different implications? What are other schools doing as well that are using SBL to see, are there some things that we want to tweak or some things that we want to change? So those are some of the things that we are currently working on for SBL. I wanted to open it up to any of the questions or anything in the chat. So I'm going to stop sharing for right now because that's all I have.
So we had one big question that I think a lot of parents are probably wondering is at what point do they get to see grades for each class? Someone expressed wanting to know where their student is at currently and feeling like they don't necessarily want to dig through each assignment in order to get an idea of that. So what would be a good next step for a parent to understand how their child is doing in their classes?
Right, and so that's one of those features with Canvas that I've been arguing with them back and forth to say it's not allowing us to show that final grade piece accurately. What it is doing is it's averaging. So when a teacher, and it's averaging it based off of an assignment piece. So basically it's an assigning a 3 at a 75%, and it's assigning a 2 at a 50% and a 1 at a 25%. So when those are translated out, it's sharing inaccurate information. So right now, the best suggestion that I can give you, and I am continuously arguing with Canvas to try and get a final grade that can report out accurately. The best suggestion that I can give you is that it's under that I look at that assignment tab, I sort them under demonstration of knowledge, and I make sure that when I scan down that list, that my student has all 3s, and any time that they have a 2 or they're missing something, that is something that they need to then talk to their teacher about and work in office hours with their teacher on.
I think there are quite a few questions, Michelle, about what do I do if my student doesn't have any grades? What do I do if my student isn't given the opportunity to retest or turn in late assignments? Things of that nature. So just from an admin's perspective, so certainly for our older children, we want to teach them and give them the words to self-advocate first with the teacher, to go to the teacher to speak to them. And then if they're not able to get the answers that they need, that please reach out to that teacher. As a parent, reach out to that teacher first to try to work through that struggle with them. But then it is definitely appropriate to then reach out to their admin. So Mrs. Ritter at the middle school and Mr. Elsip at the high school to provide them support. We have teachers at different levels. So we've got brand new teachers. We have teachers that are coming out of industry. We have teachers that have taught for 30 years. And this is completely foreign and new and a challenge to them. And that's where this amazing team of Carissa, John Jennings, Mackenzie Harper, and Michelle Gasser are going in to support our teachers because they're on a learning curve as well. So if all else fails, I mean, Michelle Gasser is always there as a key person in terms of SBL. And then if you're not getting the support you need from the admin, then it can be escalated up to myself. So I accidentally, there's an anonymous question. I apologize. I hit answer live. So I hope I answered that question because I said answer live and I was trying to answer on the Q&A section for you. So my apologies. And I hope I got it. And if not, anonymous person, if you still have a question and I missed it, please put it back in there for us. So the other thing, I think, Michelle, there's still a lot of confusion about the mode and averaging and the difference and why we're doing one for middle school, why we're doing one for high school, and the statistical like curve of grades and how it relates to the grading of our students as it stands. So I don't know if you can quickly cruise through that Q&A because there's definitely a theme in there of questions about it.
Okay, so the piece about why we are reporting out grades differently for middle school and for high school. In high school, your courses are more specialized. So when you're taking specific courses like statistics or you're geometry, you are not doing all of the different standards underneath the math. I guess you're not doing all of the different categories under math. So in math, you have numbers and operations, you have algebraic thinking, you have geometry, you have data and statistics, and so on. So because in high school you become a lot more specialized in those areas, they are not assigning out their grades by category. They're assigning them out as one final letter grade. In middle school, it allows us that opportunity to see what are students really good at and where are they struggling. So in the instance of math, for example, they'll have algebraic thinking, they'll have geometry, and they'll have numbers. I know it's not called numbers and operations anymore, but it's numbers base 10, I think is what it's called. And when they have are reported out on those different categories, it allows the teacher to see what are the areas, the strengths of this student, what are the areas that they still need support in. And then when we move them up for the next year, what are they ready for? So if a student is really struggling in geometry in their math course in middle school, are they quite ready for geometry yet? Or should they be taking another course that can help prepare them for that? So it helps us to determine acceleration. It helps us to determine what's the next step for that student. So in middle school, it's kind of almost that bridge between what we're doing in elementary school with all of the different standard breakdowns, but it's not quite high school where they're getting that final letter grade.
There's a question, Michelle, about if a student has zeros for the content, are they failing?
So if a student has zeros, it means that they have not submitted that assignment. Teachers have or should be posting in their announcements. That's what we have asked them to do. We've asked them to post in their announcement tabs when the closing date for each unit is. So for example, I believe it's our language arts department has determined that 2 weeks after the end of a unit, they will be closing that unit. And that's so that they can then focus on the material in the unit that they're currently teaching instead of having to continuously go back and regrade things from a prior unit. So what they do is once they finished unit 1, they should be posting to the Canvas announcements page. They should be posting an announcements to say, hey students, the unit is ending. Please look at your grades. And if you need to resubmit anything or make up any of your demonstration of knowledge activity assignments, please make sure that they're in by this due date. And most of our departments have those due dates or are having those closing dates.
So I see a quick question that can be answered very easily. So if you are looking to know who your the supervisor is of one of your child's teachers, if they are an elementary school teacher, it would be Mrs. McElroy. If they are a middle school teacher, it would be Mrs. Ritter. If it's a high school teacher, it would be Mr. Alsop. And then Michelle, as you know, is the director of professional development. And then Ms. Kovaleski is someone that you could always go to if you're having trouble understanding who to reach out to. But those will be the 3 direct supervisors of each level at our school.
Please know that when you do send us an email, we typically ask if you've spoken to the teacher. We do want to empower our teachers to be the first point of contact. We want them to be the ones to be able to go explain to you and to go through their grade book with you and to take a look at things. There sometimes are mistakes, and those mistakes can easily be fixed having those conversations with the teacher. So we will always ask first if you've spoken with the teacher, and then after that, and if there's no resolution, then definitely reach out to the supervisor at that point.
And at this point, Michelle, I think it's fair to say we've gone through every teacher's grade book. So
Yes.
are you aware of any teachers that don't have grades posted? I know I don't remember where it came up in this QA, but there was definitely somebody that felt that there was a class that currently did not have any grades.
All courses, I know I personally went through all core courses over Thanksgiving break. Every single grade book, every single assignment, making sure that they are in the Learning Mastery gradebook, making sure that if they're demonstration of knowledge, that they have their rubrics attached. So I know that that's happened, and I know that my team has gone through all of the grade books for everybody that they coach and have been working with teachers. So there shouldn't be anybody that I know of that does not have grades. If they do not have grades, please reach out to the teacher. And I would definitely ask that teacher first. And then from there, I would go to the supervisor if you don't receive an answer.
Michelle, are you able to take a peek at the Q&A as well?
Oh, yes, I can. And then I think that might cover pretty much everything for right now. I can stay on for another 16 minutes for anybody who has any additional questions that I haven't answered.
I think there's a couple in that Q&A. I know Kimberly Lander asked about if teachers are struggling with SBL. We have surveyed our teachers. Unfortunately, not everybody fills out a survey, but those that filled it out, it does show that there is a small group of teachers, but by and large, most of our teachers are involved in the learning curve. And just as Michelle started off our midway through her presentation, she talked about next steps. So from that survey, there were common themes in which we identified as struggles for our students, our staff, our parents, and our teachers are engaging in how do we overcome some of those struggles. Unfortunately, there was no way to make sure that everybody was going to learn at the same pace with this SBL. Just as we have to differentiate with our students, we're differentiating with our teachers and making sure everybody has what they need and can understand SBL and can implement it and continue that, through this year and into next year. There was no way without, I wish we could have said, let's do SBL and traditional grading simultaneously, but you can just imagine how that would have been received from our teachers. So it was an initiative that we've been working on for 3 years. This is our 3rd year in that rollout. So it was that we are now fully implementing SBL at all levels. So I hope that answered your question or your concern, Kim, but if not, we can take that conversation offline further.
There was a question about what happens in courses that don't have state standards, such as astronomy and chemistry. Astronomy and chemistry do have state standards. And we also, so our state standards are in science, are written after NGSS standards. So they're the same, just like our state standards for math and for language arts and for social studies are based off of Common Core. They have to be in order for us to receive federal funding. That's how the federal government funds our state and how our state then funds our districts, which is why schools have to report out on standards. But in astronomy and in chemistry, they use the earth science standards for the astronomy ones. And then for chemistry, they do have chemistry standards. Someone says that they've reached out to their teacher several times. If you've reached out to a teacher several times and they have not responded back to you, please reach out to one of the supervisors, so that if it's high school, Mr. Alsop, if it's middle school, Ms. Ritter, so that they can address this with the teacher. Like Ms. Kowaleski said, just like in any place in the workforce, some are more proficient at things than others. Some maybe are more on top of things than others are, and that is definitely something that Ms. Ritter or Mr. Alsop need to know. I have been going through grade books. My team has been going through grade books and having those conversations with teachers who may be behind in their grading.
I think there was a question about students doing some of the work, like they're not wanting to do the work leading up to those assessments. And when I say assessments, it could be a presentation, it could be a demonstration, it could be a paper, it could be an assessment, and students not putting in the work for the practice, and then they struggle on that assessment. I have heard of teachers, and I think it's a great approach, that unfortunately they kind of have to fail forward. So if we've got, I'm a prime example of being a very strong helicopter parent and pushing my kid and being a parent that was on, I didn't have Canvas, but I had another learning management system. And it was like, you have to get this done, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. Well, when I come away, if they've not learned to manage some of their own work habits, then they struggle more. So they would struggle more when they get into college if they end up in college. So in this practice, when they get to the test, if they don't do well on the test, and then they're encouraged to go speak to their teacher and retest or redo the assignment, many of the teachers have said, okay, well, you didn't do well on this test, and I want to support you in improving your grade, but now we need to take a step back, and then we need to do those homework assignments. You know, in the case of math, maybe we need to show that demonstration of knowledge before I'm going to give you that opportunity to retake that assessment. So that is an added bonus of it's teaching them to be more aware and the need for the practice, and understanding have ownership of, hey, I need to practice to be proficient in something. So although they might fail forward and they might fail miserably, the first attempt is that learning that's going to get them to be more successful down the road. So, and these grades, if it's a year-long course, we're looking at the final grades at the end of May. So understand where your kids are. It's the growth. It's not the semester long or the quarter long grades that we're looking at, if that helps any. And if I made any missteps, Michelle, and you want to jump in there, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm sorry, I've been pretty quiet, just kind of listening to this. I kind of just want to play off that real quick, Lynn, and just talk a couple of questions I see about what colleges are expecting. The reality of it is every college expects something different. So that's a moving target that's difficult to hit anyway. I could tell you my own two daughters who are in two different colleges now have found that their college professors have been more lenient with deadlines than any of their high school teachers ever were. So when I hear the idea of setting, you know, the students up for being able to meet deadlines in college, I think that's that one's very dependent on where the kids want to go anyway. But the other piece of it is that, and I think what colleges, what colleges always expect is that when a student receives an A, that means they've demonstrated a high level of proficiency with the subject. And when they receive a B, you know, slightly less and that type of thing, that's what the universities, colleges always expect when they see that. And that's what standards-based grading in learning gives us. So I actually think that at the end, we're going to find that we're really preparing our students even maybe more so for college success than we have been in the past.
There was a question, I know we're running low on time, but there was a question about our 8th graders that are accelerating into 9th grade courses, and how will they be graded? So if they're in a 9th grade course, Michelle, would they be graded on a high school standard? I just want to be sure that we answer that for that parent.
Yes, so if your student is taking a high school level course, they will be graded as a high schooler. So someone asked, based off of what Ms. Kowalewski just said about final end of the year grades versus semester. So some courses are semester long, so they will get their final grade in December because they start their own, they end at semester and they don't continue on. Our core classes like language arts, social studies, math, I know I forgot one, science, they are year long. So they continue on, for the most part, they can, unless they're an elective, they continue on for the remainder of the year. So just like you had in Infinite Campus last year, where you had a semester grade in December, you'll have a semester grade at the end of the year. Now, you'll notice that in Learning Mastery Gradebook that there's multiple standards in there, and some of them are not yet assessed, or some of them are have only maybe been assessed once, and that's because any guaranteed viable curriculum spirals. So students see material often and in different ways. So they might see a standard now that they're then going to see maybe in February, that they might see again in April at a different level. So that's something to just keep in mind with those, that grade piece.
Tracy Rodenbaugh asked about the our struggle with the 3 to 4, that gap, and an incentive to go from a 3 to 4, and how can that be remedied? Do you want to?
So there's a couple things. One, students are starting to, as we're doing these calculations, remember that we have for units that there are those deadlines, those deadlines where typically on it, typically it's 2 weeks after the end of a unit, the teachers are closing that unit. If a student didn't do well, or maybe got a 2 in that unit and did not go back and try to do retakes, didn't go back and try and work with their teacher, they have a 2 as for that standard. That then ends up bringing or giving, could possibly affect their overall score, especially in high school, since those standards get averaged together. So when they have that 4, it's ensuring that average score is going to be higher. So in the case of my own child, if this was the final reporting out, he would have a 2 on the one standard, a 4 on the other standard, a 2 on the other standard, and a 3 on the last standard. If he didn't make any of those corrections on that 2, he would have a 2.7 or a B. So going and pushing for those 4s is what's raising those students' average score on that final grade, especially in that high school piece. We do have our teachers having those continuous conversations about how do we continue to motivate students to move from a 3 to a 4, and what are the authentic tasks that we're having students do in class to show that, right? Does it need to be on an assessment? Can it instead be in a presentation or a PBL that they're doing? Could that be how they then are showing some of those higher level tasks? So those conversations are ongoing.
If I could just clarify real quick, because I see that the question came up again about like a world lit class. The way I tend to think of year-long classes is 2 separate semester classes, meaning that at the end of first semester, grades are posted to the transcript. That's permanent. And in the next semester, another grade is, then the second semester kids earn another grade that's posted. So I think that's, I mean, I know that's what Michelle was saying, but I just keep seeing that question keep popping back up. So I just want to make sure that
Yeah.
we're crystal clear there. So
Your
thank you.
semester long grades, and like if it's a semester long course that ends in December and will not continue in January, that those final grades would be final, and the standards would all be taught within this time period. And then your year-long courses, you have your semester final grade in December, and then the standards continue to be taught and spiral through for the remaining of the year, and you have one at the end of the year. So I hope I made that a little more clear. Sorry about that.
So they have the ability to improve upon those standards though in the year-long course.
Correct.
January, February, March, which would then be identified at the end of the year with
May.
in May with the culminating grade, like the final grade.
Correct. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming. It looks like we've answered most of the questions unless anybody sees something in here.
I think there's probably quite a few still in the Q&A. A parent had asked, and I agree, and I hope we can do it, if there's a way to screenshot or save all of the questions and answers that we've worked through tonight, to be able to put it in an FAQ, to be able to capture this and create those common themes. But we might have to not quickly close this out as we're saying goodbye to our parents and somehow screenshot. I don't know how to save the.
I know it saves all of my chats. I will take some screenshots and see if it also saves the Q&A. I know it does save the chats. I believe it saves the Q&A as well. And I've recorded this as well.
And I would say to those that if you still have lots of burning questions or a burning question, please reach out to teachers, reach out to admin, reach out to Michelle Gasser, myself. We want to work with you. We know that this transition has not been as easy as one would hope on any of our stakeholder groups. So we're working with our students, our teachers, and definitely we want to work with our parents. Our partnership is going to be key to our student success. So please reach out. Do not worry about being burdensome. We're here to work with you, and definitely there are times we've had conversations with parents that we have things that we take away from those conversations and we learn from a parent perspective. So we do appreciate all of that information and hope to continue this conversation offline past this forum tonight. So thank you very much, everybody. And thank you for the team that's here supporting us tonight. So thank you to Michelle, John Jennings, Carissa, Elliott, Mr. Alsop.
And Miss Harper's here. She just didn't promote up the panelists.
And Ms. Harper, who's maybe one of those anonymous attendees that's trying to throw us a. She's like, I'm going to test you guys.
Have a great night, everybody.
Bye all.